Ian with eTrailer here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Curt T-Connector harness with 7-way plug on our 2023 Honda Passport. Let's get into some features and then that install. So the Honda Passport is already known as a very reliable and very cost-effective vehicle, and something that most neighbors would choose as a mid-size SUV. We see them pretty often. So I wanted to touch base on this harness set because it's going to be a great way for you to be able to open up what you can do with your Honda Passport. If you've got a small towable or even an accessory that's going to need some type of 7-way, this is the easiest way to throw that on there. It hooks directly up to our factory harness that's located inside the vehicle, and then we've just got it mounted right outside to be able to have quick access to be able to hook up to our trailer. And this is going to function as a normal 7-way and give you those options, so that way you've still got your 4-pole, which is going to be, of course, just normal turn signals, stoplight, the ground, and then the clearance lights as well. But additionally, you're getting those other 3 connectors in there for your 12-volt charge line, your reverse light, and also your trailer braking system. So that's going to cover all of those functions. And it's not just great for trailers. You may have an accessory that would take this 7-way as well. We would always go back to the Saris Door County, which is going to be an electric styled bike rack for e-bikes that lowers to the ground. So this will also work with those type of accessories. Talking about the install for this particular harness, it is not difficult by any means compared to a universal harness where you'd be tapping into factory wiring. This one is just going to be up in the driver's side underneath some of the plastics, and I'm going to walk you through that whole process of how to access those. I think really the only difficult part of it, to be completely honest, is going to be running a section of wiring through a grommet and underneath the vehicle safely back to our hitch point. So I'm going to walk everybody through that, and of course for you DIYers, follow along. But if you happen to watch this video and you feel like this is a little more than you want to handle, or just something you don't have time for, go ahead and check out the dealer locator on our website. We'd be happy to get you a trained professional that can throw that on, but otherwise let's hop into that install. We're going to start by coming to the rear of the vehicle, and we're just going to need to get this cover out of the way. A good way to do that, there's actually a hook set on this. You can just take that loose and then hop right up to that passenger door. Reach over, grab that hook, and that'll hook just right to our stud for our headrest. And with that out of the way, we will remove this plastic panel here. There's 2 unlock tabs. They're just quarter turn, and then you can lift that whole panel out. Set that aside. We will need to remove the spare tire next, so there's a little center twist bolt that we'll need to get out. You may have to use a pair of pliers at first just to get it loose. It's in there pretty snug. And we'll remove that center piece and pull the spare tire out. On our driver's side, underneath this part of the carpet, there's going to be a small plastic rivet that we'll need to remove. You can use either a flathead or trim panel removal tool. And we're going to peel that carpet back. Right here there is a section that'll need to be lifted up because it wraps around this bracket. So lift that up first before pulling the rest of it. And we'll get that out of the way. You may have to move the jack as well. With that carpet out of the way, we've exposed the grommet underneath this that we're going to be accessing, and got the carpet out of the way for our panel over here. With a small flathead or pick, we're going to come to this fastener here. There's a cover that we'll need to get out of the way. So you can just go underneath that and lift. And we're going to access that Phillips head there. The screw that we're trying to get out is rather difficult to break loose, so we've found a nice wide Phillips head, And then you're going to find some of your screwdrivers will either have a spot for a wrench towards the handle, or possibly the entire shank itself would accept a wrench. So we've found it's easiest to get that nice wide Phillips head sat down in there real tight and then break that loose. Now we can back it all the way out and remove that bracket and set it aside. We will then come to our little hook on this driver's side that's got an 8mm fastener behind it. You'll take that small flathead we had before, pull back that cover, and remove that 8mm bolt. And we'll set that bolt aside. We're then going to remove our threshold. With that, you can just get your fingers up underneath and give that a slight tug, and it'll start to work it out of the fasteners. You'll just start at one edge and work your way to the center, and then go to your passenger side and repeat that towards the center. And we'll set that aside as well. We're going to be working this whole plastic panel away from the body of the vehicle. If you start at the bottom, you can get a trim panel tool underneath, or sometimes you could just pry it with your fingers and have it come away. But we're going to work our way up the rest of the panel, just popping all of the tabs loose. And when we get to the top, we're going to continue just going across. And that'll allow us to peel this back far enough to access the 12 volt that's plugged into this. You'll just push down on that center tab and pull out. That center tab's right there. Maybe easier with a little flat head. And we can just kind of push that to the side for now. The plug we're trying to access is pretty far up there, so we're just going to kind of leave this like it is for now. And we're going to come back under the carpet to remove this plastic trim to access the grommet underneath. You can just use a trim panel tool and start working up all these fasteners. Push that off to the side. We're trying to access this grommet here. Pull this all back to get to our factory plug, which is going to be right here. It's time for us to route this up into the cab. We're going to be coming through that grommet that we exposed that's got the wiring harness going through. All we need to do up here is just squeeze that grommet and push it down below the vehicle. So if you just work those edges and give it a little shove, we'll get that down below and get below the vehicle ourselves. Underneath the vehicle, we're going to be working on the back side of this cross member. The bushing is right up here. But first we need to make sure we get the other end, not our factory end that's going to be hooking up, but that end with the 7-pole routed. And I wanted to show how I did that. So this is going to be feeding through that grommet. And I went in between this part of the wiring harness and this cross member. So I'm going to route this up and around, zip tie to this provided bracket. And then we'll come along the hitch and in right next to our receiver. Feed the white wire and these two plugs through. The box should also fit as well. So we're going to start with our plugs. You may just have to go one at a time, but we want to make sure we avoid looping over anything that might get caught on the way up. You may have to use a screwdriver as well to kind of move that cable that's in the way out of the way. And then make sure you close that dust cover for the fuse holder. Is going to be really difficult if that dust cover's off. And that box will fit, you just have to really wedge it up in there. It's just big enough to fit through that hole. So once you've got that passed, let's go ahead and pull out the slack from down below here, just forcing all that extra loom up into the hole. With all that ran and our appropriate amount of slack in line, we're gonna shove that grommet back up for us to be able to access from the inside of the vehicle. For routing the harness inside the vehicle, we want to make sure we come underneath this smaller wire and sensor, and we're going to come over to that driver's side. You want to lift, there's a little tension point right here that you can just lift past. It'll seem like you're stuck on something, but you'll be able to get it past that. It's just catching on the bracket. We're going to route that wiring harness up underneath the panel and then reach down and grab it here. And we're just going to focus on this plug here. If we were hooking up to your backup sensors, this is what's going to hook to it, this blue wired connector, but we're just going to focus on the wired connector that's got a bunch of wires going in the back of it, and we'll grab that factory harness and slide the connector over until it clicks into place. With all that hooked up, we do need to hook up the ground next. You can either use the provided self-tapper that they give you for the kit and tap that somewhere into a clean metal place. I actually found a factory ground that we're going to be working with. It looks like it's a 10mm bolt that we'll need to remove for that factory ground. So we'll just go ahead and pop that loose. We're going to feed that eyelet over that stud and then go ahead and snug that back down. Now we'll come back to our fuse holder, pull that dust cover back off, and use the provided 10 amp fuse. We're going to be popping into that. We will not be able to access this again once we've got it back behind the plastics here, so we're just going to have that in place. They do provide some nice double-sided adhesive that will just stick to one side of the box. Then we'll find a nice home for this to live. You can push that plastic back in the way, that way you've got an idea of what you have to work with. I'm just going to work all those wires up underneath our plastics here and adhere this box to a nice flat spot. Now, one thing to mention about the routing of the wiring coming up through the grommet before we cut anything or add any RTV, we want that more to the driver's side of that hole we're coming up out of. The reasoning behind that is this plastic cover that we'll have to put back in place is only going to allow that wiring to come out the top. So we'll want to make sure that routes in that general direction when we're putting in the harness. Now we'll need to deal with this grommet. We're going to go ahead and just cut a good side slit in that. What you can do is just kind of pull that grommet apart and you'll be able to see down a little bit further. Just get back behind the wires opposed to next to them. That should be more than enough. With the wiring and grommet back into place, what we'll want to do now is use the provided RTV and just backfill the rest of this hole so that way no debris or water can get into the cab. Take that plastic cover and just push all those green rivets back into place. And before we do any reassembly, as far as back here, we're going to go up front. There's a couple fuses I'm going to walk you through. There's going to be 3 other fuses that will come with the kit. We've got these smaller 20 amps, and then you'll have one larger 30 amp. we'll need to come up to the engine compartment where we're going to be removing this. You'll just squeeze the little tabs and pull that off. It does have a breakdown of how those are set up in there, but I'm going to walk you through it real quick here. So we've got two open smaller slots. We're going to be using those, and then this larger one here at the end. So we'll start with our 30 amp and plug that one in, and then we'll take our 220s, and both of those are going to slide into those open spaces. And we'll replace that cover. I've already got us mocked up just to make sure everything was going to line up the way it needs to. We do have an additional long bracket that we had to use to attach directly to the hitch here in the rear, and then also the 7-pole connector bracket that we added to this neighbor's order as well, just so we can have this tidy and clean in the rear. And I've already got the plug that comes with it, so it's going to have this head that I've got attached to the bracket with the kit. I've got that mocked up, and we'll go ahead and plug in the harness to the rear of that plug. And now that we've got everything hooked up, we're going to run through the functions. We're going to be using a tester box here. You can pick up a smaller 7-way tester there on etrailer.com to be able to test that, or just hook up to your trailer accessory, and that should show you whether it's functioning properly or not. We're going to start with our clearance lights on, and then our clearance lights off, and then that brake signal, our left turn, and then our right turn. And that's going to conclude our look at and installation of the Curt T-Connector harness with 7-pole adapter on our 2023 Honda Passport. My name's Ian with eTrailer. Appreciate you watching.